I have 11:15, and so we're going to get started. I want to first of all welcome those who may be joining us online, or those who may decide that they want to check out our YouTube channel and listen to the recording. So we welcome you as well. Today, as we continue our course on people of the resistance, what does it mean to follow Jesus in times such as this? Today's lecture is on courageous discipleship in action. What does it mean to be a person of faith and a member of the resistance? And I have my resistance pin on me today. Yeah.
Okay. My question had to do in the first session near the end. You had a favorable comment about Presiding Bishop Curry and his statements that he's made. And since that session was focused on Christian nationalism, I was wondering if I had missed statements that he had made on the topic there. So I went and looked for it, and I couldn't find anything. I actually invoked my AI app to do a search, and this was the Microsoft Copilot, and it came back with that they could not find any statements from Bishop Curry on Christian nationalism. And I guess then my question is it seems to me that we've gotten ourselves into not to speak is to speak era.
So if you'd give me a chance, okay. I'll answer that question as we have the lecture today. Thank you, Paul.
Okay.
And I appreciate your concern, but I do have some updates that I will share with you about how we are seeking to address what's happening as a church. I'm going to start by showing you a couple of videos of the resistance, and I'll let Marco put those up for us, and then we'll begin.
Broken down and tired of living life on the merry-go-round, and you can't find a fighter, but I see it in you, so we gon' walk it out. Move mountains.
For centuries, men and women have battled tyrants in their fight for freedom. Their resistance is legendary. And now the people of Minnesota have joined their ranks. Bruce Springsteen has even written a song about them, On the Streets of Minneapolis. There are copies of that on your table. Using a nonviolent approach, citizens stepped up to protect their immigrant neighbors. People of different faith traditions gathered together in churches and public spaces to sing songs of liberation. Some 30,000 volunteers in Minneapolis became trained observers to alert neighbors when ICE invaded their communities. The local police even joined in by bringing donuts and pizza to the protesters. The people of Minneapolis have shown the rest of the nation what we can do and what we must do to face what is yet to come from a draconian regime. Beth and I were in Minneapolis this past week and had a chance to visit with some of the faith leaders back there. It is an incredible experience that they had to share with us about how not only the Lutheran pastors, but others of denominations and interfaith leaders would gather together in protest, but gathering together in worship, in rallies, to lift the spirits of the people, to be part of the resistance. That's the energy that's going to propel change. We saw it in the heart of the horrifying Minneapolis crackdown, where strength, good humor, and fierce passion of Minnesotans who refused to stop defending their neighbors and resisting 3,000 ICE agents lit a candle of hope for the world. It's everywhere people continue to connect with their neighbors and reinforce bonds of community which promote empathy and sanity and anchor us when the rest of the world seems to be spinning out of control. It's the best of America standing up to confront the worst. The energy is really our hope for surviving this bitter season and building something better, healthier, and more humane. Porter's Gate has written a song called "We Won't Make Peace with Oppression." Dane and his group sang that song at a recent fundraiser for Wizen. We won't make peace with oppression. Words of resistance, courage, and hope. We will stand against violence of every form. And I'm going to ask you to join me in the words that are printed in bold. We will march on the streets. No justice, no peace.
We won't make peace with oppression.
We won't turn away from the pain of our brothers, cries of our sisters, grieving of our mothers.
We won't make peace with oppression.
We won't turn away from destructive politicians, overflowing prisons, corruption in our systems.
We won't make peace with oppression. Almighty God, help us not to be afraid. Give us your strength.
Some good news that I have to share. This is something that just recently has been shared with us by the churchwide, ELCA churchwide, and our synod. And by the way, the Council of Bishops, I may have misspoke when I said Michael Curry, our Bishop Curry. It was the Council of Bishops that issued a statement against Christian nationalism. And since then, our Bishop Curry and other faith leaders have come together to put together what's called Faith in Us, a national multi-faith clergy election protection effort. They are inviting clergy of all denominations for a training event on May 27 and 28. All the sessions are for clergy across the country. And just to let you know, the individuals who will be leading this training session were architects of the Minnesota Faith Leaders Resistance. They will share political analysis developed by 12 organizations across the country of what team democracy is up against as we approach the midterm elections, which is becoming more and more difficult and crucial. They will share lessons and tools from Minnesota that can help clergy build what is needed to protect our democracy across the country in 2026. They're asking all clergy to band together and to work with their congregations to make sure that the elections are safe, fair, and that they happen. So this is something that our churchwide and our synod now is partnering in. Let's turn to an inspirational story that took place in Germany prior to the fall of the Berlin Wall. Some of you know this story. I've shared it in the past. Under communist rule in Eastern Germany, being a Christian, and especially a member of the church, was frowned upon by the government. Government spies would infiltrate worship services and other gatherings of the faithful. You were blacklisted if you were a member of a faith community. Young people were barred from attending university. Adults could often not find good-paying jobs. Yet through this time of persecution, Christians found their faith deepened, giving them hope and courage to face challenges and hardships of an evil regime. And then something happened in Leipzig in spring of 1989 when demonstrations against the German Democratic Republic reached a fever pitch, signaling the beginning of the end for the East German communist regime. The St. Nicholas Church stated that they wanted to start a service called Monday Demonstrations that grew throughout 1989 and evolved in numbers and in purpose. Originally, gatherings were held as prayers for peace, providing aid and comfort to opponents of the communist regime away from the prying eyes of the Stasi spies, but soon developed into a large nonviolent protest network that organized increasingly larger demonstrations across Leipzig, with the faithful demanding an easing of harsh government restrictions on freedom of movement and of the press. Then, on October 9th, just after 6 p.m., thousands crammed into St. Nicholas for a service, and then moved out into the streets in a march, vastly growing in numbers. Some estimate that up to 100,000 people were present, waving banners that said, "We are the people." They had lived under the oppression of communism for too long and were asking the same question that we should be asking. What kind of a society do we wish to live in? Police and other authorities were powerless to react in the face of such mass of humanity, and the news of the Leipzig demonstration soon filtered out to other parts of East Germany, despite the media blackout. Footage secretly recorded of the protest was smuggled into West Germany and broadcast by television stations accessible in the East, sparking even more opposition and protests to a crumbling regime. And then shortly after the October 9th protest, GDR party leader Erich Honecker was removed from office by the Politburo, and just a few weeks later, on November 9th, 1989, border checks along the Berlin Wall were abandoned, the Iron Curtain had fallen, all because believers had the courage to resist. The times we live in call for courageous compassion and strategic action. While the future of American Christianity and our gospel message is at stake, we must also forge a new vision of democracy going forward. We cannot simply go back to the way things were, where greed, racism, violence, and inequity have been the hallmarks of the empire. Jesus calls us to a radical form of discipleship, one that seeks to transform society by the power of healing love and acts of justice. One that takes us out of our comfort zones and may require sacrifice. Jesus reminds us in Matthew 16:24, those who want to follow their lives must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. Timothy Snyder has written a couple of books that remind us of what is at stake. For him, it is nothing less than our faith and our democracy. Snyder calls on Americans to resist tyrants while fighting to preserve our liberty. His book on freedom reminds us not to take our precious freedoms for granted. Freedom is the value of values, he says, because it allows difference to reside in us and in the world around us. Each of us has the right to learn and choose for ourselves what is important to us, while at the same time respecting the right of others, even those whom we may disagree with. He goes on to link democracy and freedom, saying, "We, the people, will be sovereign in government only when individuals are sovereign in their own lives." Democracy should express solidarity. That is, when the rules are right, all Americans have a voice. And Snyder concludes, our democracy will survive only by fighting for our freedom. And it is a freedom that provides a shape to that fight. It accommodates and celebrates differences of values while accepting what we all have in common. It is positive in its truth, its ethics, and in its solidarity. And perhaps now is a good time to review what we are fighting against. We talked about Christian nationalism versus Christianity. On your tables, in the bright green, is a copy of this chart that you might want to take home and look at. And just quickly to review a couple of these statements. In Christian nationalism, America is a Christian nation that the government must protect. In Christianity, it is rooted in pluralism and religious freedom. Christian nationalism claims America is especially favored by God. Christianity affirms God's love extends to all nations. And so on. You can read through, going down the list. Christian nationalism pursues political power for a narrow group. In Christianity, it sees every person as made in God's image. In Christian nationalism, it uses government to enforce religious beliefs. Christianity builds bridges with those serving the marginalized. And finally, Christian nationalism reinforces political hierarchies that privilege some over others. Christianity stands with the poor, the overlooked, and the oppressed. Well, what does Christianity and Christian nationalism have in common? Not much. And maybe the Christ figure, where one uses Christ as a mascot, the other seeks to follow Jesus. And where Jesus chooses to lead us in a spirit of humility, healing, and love. What Christian nationalism has wrought. Because the regime has embraced Christian nationalism, MAGA leaders gathered this past week to dedicate and bless a golden statue of Trump in Florida. And does it remind you of another statue of gold? There's something in the Old Testament about that, isn't there? Well, James Tellerico, who is the Democratic nominee for U.S. Senate in Texas, had something to say about it. He says, I am a Christian, but I know that the most dangerous form of government is theocracy, because the only thing worse than a tyrant is a tyrant who thinks they're on a mission from God. In his book on tyranny, Snyder offers 20 lessons from the 20th century that apply to how we can keep our freedom. And here are just a few. Do not obey in advance. Think about what more a repressive government will want, and remember you have the power to resist. Defend your institutions. They will not protect themselves. Choose one you care about, such as a newspaper, a union, or other institution. Take its side. Support it. Beware of a one-party state. Support a multi-party system and defend the rules of democratic elections. Vote. Run for office. Stand out. Someone has to. Remember Rosa Parks? The moment you set an example, the spell is broken and others will follow. Believe in the truth. To abandon facts is to abandon freedom. If nothing is true, then no one can criticize power. Be truthful. Contribute to good causes. Be active in organizations that challenge the status quo. Support a cause and help them do good. Investigate. Be informed. Realize there is much on the internet that can harm you or others. Take responsibility for what you communicate with others. Be calm when the unthinkable arrives. Modern tyranny is terror management. I think we've seen that not only in Minnesota, but now across the country. Oppose the suspension of freedom of expression, which is happening now more and more every day. Be a patriot. That is, remember what values make America great, such as justice and equal rights for all, and the dignity of every human being. And be as courageous as you can. If none of us is prepared to sacrifice or die for freedom, then all of us will die under tyranny. As we consider what it means to act with courage and defend our values of faith and freedom in times such as this, it might be helpful to review how resistance is the most successful when it is nonviolent. The protest of our Lutheran sisters and brothers in East Germany that brought down the Berlin Wall is one good example. Walter Wink has written a helpful book called Jesus and Nonviolence, The Third Way. First, he reminds us that neutrality in a situation of oppression only supports the status quo. So if we desire change and transformation, we must take action. The question is, and the question we should all be asking, is what does God require of me in response to the needs of others? How can I participate in the struggle of the oppressed for a more just world? Wink suggests that Jesus was no less committed to opposing evil than the anti-Roman resistant fighters of his time. The only difference was the means to be used and how one should fight evil. And Wink goes on to say there are three general responses to evil: passivity, violent opposition, and the third way of a militant non-violence as articulated by Jesus. For years, only two options have been ingrained in us in how we are supposed to respond when we are threatened. You know what they are? Fight or flight. Well, flight can include submission, passivity, withdrawal, and surrender. Fight often involves armed revolt, violent rebellion, direct retaliation, or revenge. Again, Jesus offers a third way, one of nonviolent resistance that is often characterized by the following: find a creative alternative to violence. Assert your own humanity and dignity as a person. Meet force with ridicule or humor. Break the cycle of humiliation. Expose the injustice of the system. Take control of the power dynamic. Stand your ground. Recognize your own power. Be willing to suffer rather than to retaliate. And be willing to undergo the penalty for breaking unjust laws. Wink offers a great illustration of how this played out during the time of apartheid in South Africa. Authorities had for a long time sought a way to destroy a particular shanty town where poor Africans lived. One day, after most of the men and women had left for work, the army arrived. The soldiers announced to a few women that they had 5 minutes to gather their belongings and to leave before the bulldozers did their work of destroying the village. The women, perhaps sensing the prudery of these farm boys who largely made up the army, stood in front of the bulldozers and stripped off all their clothes until they were naked. The army fled, never to return. It's a true story. And it's a good story. Perhaps it would help to juxtapose Jesus' teachings with Saul Alinsky's principles for nonviolent community action. These are rules he developed in an attempt to organize American workers with minority communities. Power is not only what you have, but what your enemy thinks you have. Never go outside the experience of your people. Whenever possible, go outside the experience of your enemy. Make your enemies live up to their own book of rules. Ridicule is your most potent weapon. A good tactic is one that your people enjoy. A tactic that drags on too long becomes a drag. Keep the pressure on. The threat is usually more terrifying than the thing itself. And 10, the major premise for tactics is the development of operations that will maintain a constant pressure on the opposition. A constant pressure on the opposition. Wink believes that even if nonviolent action does not immediately change the heart of the oppressor, it does affect those who are committed to it. As Martin Luther King Jr. attested, it gives them new self-respect and calls up resources of strength and courage they did not know they had. And he goes on to remind us that we are to pray for our enemies' transformation. Before we move into a strategy session to consider what political actions and potential actions in response to our current national crisis we should take, I want to leave you with these words from columnist Jennifer Rubin. She writes, "First, democracy does not defend itself, nor can we expect politicians to save us from the autocrat's clutches. The decision to capitulate or to resist rests with each one of us. Second, a virtuous circle can develop in defense of democracy. That is, ordinary people organize and protest. Politicians and officials realize resistance is popular. They step up their defense of democracy. And their increased resilience, in turn, inspires more popular defiance. And so one courageous action begets the next. Such defiance humiliates the politicians and appeasers who claim they have no choice but to go along with the autocrat. And finally, until removed from power, the Trump regime will continue destroying functional government, violating civil liberties, and weaponizing the justice system, as we have seen. But with every loss, the cult leader's veneer of invincibility cracks. In persisting despite losses, the autocrat will annoy his allies, anger the courts, and reveal his own mind-numbing incompetence. Coupled with the appalling mismanagement of the economy, the president's power and the MAGA Republicans' grip on the levers of government will be diminished until we, the voters, throw them out. Strong words from columnist Jennifer Rubin. So what does our faith require of us in times such as this? We follow a Palestinian rabbi who spoke truth to power, both to the religious leaders of his day and to the empire. He stood not with the rich and powerful, but with people on the margin, the poor, the marginalized, the disenfranchised. His ministry was not about violence, power, greed, or glory. It was about love, healing, reconciliation, and justice. Jesus calls us to do the same. In a world wounded by fear and division, the church's role is not to dominate, but to serve, not to judge, but to heal, not to retreat, but to engage. And here are a few ways of getting involved as part of the resistance. Check out Interfaith Alliance, where you can learn nonviolent mobilization tactics. And there's their website, www.interfaith alliance or training. You can participate online in modules and that you can complete at your own pace. There are Moral Mondays. In fact, there's a mass peace rally planned for tomorrow. And there is, I think it's a yellow sheet that's on your tables. Tells you more about Moral Mondays. And they have some interesting information, again, about nonviolent tactics. So that's a helpful resource that you might want to take with you. Moral Mondays. And then faith factor in defeating authoritarianism. Sojourners has and I'm going to ask Beth to pass copies of that around to each table and in a couple in the back, because it has a website on it. Actually, it's this website right down here, but if you want to find out more, I have a sheet that she's going to pass out, one per table. It's a conversation with Dr. Maria J. Steffen, who's an expert on nonviolent civil resistance. Dr. Steffen will explore how faith communities can help safeguard democratic values, build bridges, and counter authoritarian trends. Again, it's being sponsored by Sojourners Magazine. It's Wednesday, May 13th from 10 to 10:45. I've signed up for it. It's really easy. You go to that website and you'll see a place to check and where you can just click on to participate in that particular webinar. So these are three resources for you as we think about things that we can do and ways to be a part of the resistance. A couple more slides. I love this statement from Margaret Mead. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And it's time for big trouble. So I wanted to have some time for us to have strategy at tables. I'm going to invite you to, and Beth, I'm going to ask you to pass out the other sheet as well, one per table. Looking at this is a resource, Snyder's Lessons on Tyranny, or the Principles of Nonviolent Community Action that we're passing out. And I'm going to ask you to have conversation. You can pick any one of these or work through all three of them. And we'll take the next 10 minutes to do this, and we'll come back together. With your group, review either Snyder's Lessons on Tyranny or Principles of Nonviolent Community Action. Choose three, kind of the top three that your group feels would be most helpful for your situation in this time from one or the other list. Or two, share with each other ideas for actions you think reasonable in fighting the injustices of the current regime. And then three, name at least one action that you will personally plan to take going forward. Name one action that you personally plan to take going forward and share that with your group. So and the people in the back, if you want to just kind of put your chairs into a circle and have some conversation, and I'll bring you back in about 10 minutes. Okay, I'm going to invite you to come back together, give you about 30 seconds to wrap up your conversation.
Okay.
So Beth has a microphone, and let's just find which table would like to go first. And you can just share on any one of these.
Here you go, Bob.
Okay, Bob.
Right behind you.
Okay, gotcha. So we are picking three. I think we said stay informed
Stay informed.
was the most important, and echoing what you said earlier, that you have to be really careful with the internet because a lot of what you read isn't the real thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Two was be as courageous as you can. I have.
So we're on number one, right?
I have out of number three there.
Yeah.
Some of us have more comfort level with risk, and so get out there and do what you can.
Yeah.
And lastly, ridicule those in power. No, that's not exactly. But I'm pretty sure that was close, right?
Right. Good, thank you.
Sorry, back there.
In the back, Dennis.
Partly due to me, mostly due to me. We got off track a little bit. I found some agreement here. I was a little bit disturbed by the use of enemy, even though I can see how we could go there. But I would prefer that we talk about people who differ from us, and that we should find ways to invite them to ask us why we believe the way we do, so we can defend our belief systems, and then give them permission to do likewise, so we could maybe understand. I don't think really this is about philosophical differences as much as it is about just drawing lines and how people have co-opted our democracy to pit us against each other for their own selfish
Very true.
goals. And that we should resist that. And we should say, no, we're better than that. And our democracy has survived much worse than this, and those before us as well. And as a child of the 60s, I try to keep things in perspective. And so then we ended up talking about small acts of kindness. And so demonstrate your faith by your works. And it doesn't have to get complicated or too, you don't have to prophesy. All you have to do is show who you are and who you are to them.
Yeah. Well, that's living out your faith, isn't it?
Yeah.
By acts of kindness. And what you say about pitting us, of course, that has been the modus operandi, or the strategy of the current administration, is to pit us against each other. What I appreciate about Braver Angels, for example, is that it tries to bring people together who feel like they're in different places, red states, blue states, and to say, let's find out how we can talk more civilly with one another, respectfully agree to disagree, but let's find out what we have in common. And we have more in common than we have that are different.
One simple thing I found is that we've been led to believe that it's okay to call people names. And so don't take the bait.
Yes.
Don't take the bait. You don't have to call women piggies or low IQ for African Americans. Right. And
well, we're better than that.
We are much better than that. And then they would be embarrassed if you actually call them on that. Most of them, if they are honest.
Yeah, thanks, Dennis. Another table? Okay, Ed.
Can we hear the discussion that went with the Bishop and Rick Steves, and add that to your class? Is that broadcast?
It's available online, yes.
Is that possible that we could hear it together and talk about that?
Well,
or have Rick Steves, Rick,
no,
whatever his name.
We're not going to get Rick Steves.
No. Oh,
even though he's a good friend.
Yes. But what's your other Rick I just talked about? Rick Larson, he comes here to worship. Ask him to come and sit down with us.
Well, that's a good suggestion, Ed. We can explore that. But in the meantime, he's talking about the Bishop Shelley and Rick Steves have been sharing their concern about Christian nationalism and the current state of affairs in the country. And it is available online. If you go to the Synod website,
Or St. Mark's Cathedral website.
or St. Mark's Cathedral website, which is where they spoke most recently. So I know it's on the St. Mark's Cathedral website, and I believe it's also on our Synod website. So those are two places you can go to check out their presentations, which are very powerful. Leslie.
I want to acknowledge the two warriors I have sitting with me at this table. Because right away, this courageous lady, Carol, comes up with the problem we all face, which is all my friends who are in their 80s turn off the TV, they don't want to talk about politics, and they say there's nothing we can do. Now, how that fits into our strategy session is that Dan jumps in and starts talking about and identifying all the barriers that we have. Our family lives far away from us, family and friends. So many of them are brainwashed by MAGA. Is it okay for me to describe it that way? They're MAGA, they're Trump supporters. The youth who are MAGA affiliated, you can't talk to them. We try to get in touch with our love for these people. These are family and friends that we love. And one phrase that came up when we were talking about barriers that we can use, help me understand. Help me understand. Instead of being so oriented towards telling or persuading or arguing or convincing, invite them by saying, help me understand that belief, that value. Then we talked about kindness, showing who we are. Thank you for that. And Dan came up with the example of U.S. aid, the cutting of U.S. aid on such a global level that people all over the world are dying and suffering because of it, and asking these people we love, how can you be in favor of taking that away? And then, some other ideas that came up, they're in denial. They don't believe that that's true. It's not true that U.S. aid was cut and people are dying. That's not true. The idea that we need to be more passive, meaning non-confrontational, in alignment with don't call people names or rise to the bait, to address each other from our loving nature, our love for our family of friends, the way that we express the invitation, help me to understand, and then being willing to describe, I don't agree, and why I don't agree, and why this comes down to our core values. And just to conclude, I think we all embrace this last little snippet I heard, what we have in common.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Leslie. Another table? We'll have maybe one more.
On number 3, stand out, and along with share with others ideas for actions. So I brought up that every Friday in Everett at 5 o'clock at the south end of Broadway, for the last year and a half at least, there's a demonstration, the Fascist Friday demonstration. that you can show up and you can stand out there with a sign for an hour and let your voice be heard. Another thing is that you can make a commitment to at least once a week send a letter to your congressperson and senators to let them know what you're thinking.
Right. So, participate in a protest, like the Friday protest? Yeah. And it's, what Friday? Every Friday. The Every Friday protest, and write a letter to your congresspeople. Okay, one last comment. Okay, I'm going to have Marco show one last little clip. This is from an interfaith group in Minneapolis, facing their fears, their challenges during the invasion of their city, and listen to their song. It's a song for us going forward.
Are truly all at stake. Let not the hate divide us. Let not our spirit break. Let not our courage falter. Let not our bravery fail. Let unity bring victory. May God lift us up as we take our stand. Have a good week.